So, let's go on. Number 2. Explain the change, you guys. Explain the change in the dividend payout rate. So that is DPS over EPS, and then I want to say, okay, this is dividends, this is retained in terms of percentages. So now they ask me, what is the change? Now if I look at this, this is what I told you. Last year, dividends was 96% of the earnings, and we only retained 4. This year, we made the percentage dividends less. It's only 80% net. But now remember, it doesn't mean that the guy getting dividends is going to get less, right? Because maybe the net profit is now more. And if you look at this now, can you see the dividends is a higher cents. So they actually get more, even though it's a smaller portion of the net profit. Okay, so now what do they say? The dividend payout rate decreased from 96 to 80%. So what does that mean? What does that mean is that a bigger percentage of the EPS is now being saved. Why do we make retained income more? For future development or future growth, or to have more a reserve fund for in case something goes wrong, anything like that. So they say there, can I just show you? So the trend is just one tick, but look here, the company has retained fund for future expansional plans. Can you see that's 2 ticks? And all of you know that. So forget about this one where you and your teacher have no clue what to do, which is only 2 marks. Can you see here you can get 2 marks without even thinking? Okay. Never get stuck on the stuff you don't know. Let's go on. Last one. Explain whether the shareholders should be satisfied with the earnings, in other words, quote EPS, and returns, in other words, quote ROCE, right? Quote 2 indicators. So can you see, if you quote the EPS, 1 tick, return on average shareholders' equity, can you see they are going to take ROCE? You don't have to write it out. There's already 2 ticks. And if you show the trends, it went from this to this, there's a tick. It went from this to this, there's a tick. You see? 4 points. Now you need to make a comment. So, ROCE is my investment. What do I always compare ROCE with? Alternative investments. And what is your alternative investment here? Do they give me? Fixed deposit interest, 5%. Is ROCE more? Let's quickly look. Where's ROCE? There's ROCE. It's 12. So it's more than the return on fixed deposit. Remember, interest is returns. Okay, you guys sharp. The first thing, let me just again tell you, it's so super important. Go back to those videos that we made the Saturdays before the prelim, where I tell you what to look at. But with ratios, you cannot go into ratios if you do not know what each ratio contains. So in other words, if you look at the heading, profitability, you know it's all the income statement stuff on something. Okay? You know liquidity, it's asset test, current, debtors collection, creditors payment, stock on hand, stock turnover. You know they work in pairs. If I go to risk gearing, you know it's debt equity, it's ROCE. You know it's high-low geared, positive, negative geared. If you go to the share price and shareholding, you know it's the majority shareholding thing. If they say returns, earnings, dividends, you know ROCE, EPS, DPS. If you know, if they talk about issuing shares or repurchasing shares, you're going to compare it to market price, NAV. This is study work. So you need to go, I would suggest, go home, make a summary of what to use when they ask what. Come and check with me if it is right. But guys, don't say that this is the difficult work, because I say again to you, if you look at the mark allocation, 2/3 of everything here is always the naming of the ratio and the quoting of the trend. It's always 2/3. Only 1/3 is, oh, this is good, this is what's happening, this is my opinion. And most of those opinions is also fixed ones. Okay, so please make this your easiest question. Go into the paper knowing in paper 1, question 2 and 3 is your place to get the marks. Question 1 is where you're going to get a lot of adjustments, so make sure about your formats. Question 4 is the loose cannon that can fall anywhere. So that would not be the one that you count on, because you do not know what's going to come. Now, I want to make sure with corporate governance. First of all, corporate governance can go anywhere. But I always think they always like to ask something, first of all, about the ownership. Who is the owners? Meaning the shareholders. Who is the managers? The directors. You see? This is your shareholders. This is your directors. One person can be both an owner and a shareholder. That's the one question they like to ask. The second question they like to ask is they ask about the audit reports itself. Okay, so make sure you understand your audit reports. Now, audit reports, let me just find the audit report here. Please don't start talking. I ask you nicely. Just stay in the zone. Let us finish this. I want to quickly show you audit. Okay. So, I just want to show you this. Oh, not that one. Which one? This one. If I show you auditing, right, the main thing is, okay, so you have to go and learn all these different terms. Independent auditors is another name for an external auditor, right? It's a CA. He needs to be unbiased, no contact, no interest in that company. But now, can you see the audit report, first of all, is a very long thing, okay? But now, the main thing here is this little paragraph, because this paragraph tells you if it's a good or a bad audit report, okay? So now, can you see, it will always start, in our opinion. And what is their opinion based on? Those few pages that they audited. Can you see, they didn't audit 1 to 43. So if something is off on 1 to 43, they will not know. They are limited in their knowledge because they don't have time to redo everything. Okay, now, can you see what is my reports? I'm going to quickly go there. Can you see here, unqualified report says exactly that paragraph that I showed you. That is your base paragraph. And if it's straight like that, you know it's unqualified. So if it says, in our opinion, fairly presents. And what do they measure it against? IFRS, né? And the company law, the company act. Those two things need to be in place when we record our books. And if it is, our opinion is that this is a fair representation. You get it? It's like I come into the class, I do not have time to check all your books. So I take 4 books, I mark that. and I take that as a fair representation of what's going on in my class. So if all 4 of them didn't do their homework, I can assume that none of you did it, right? Or if all 4 did it, I will assume everybody did. Can you see? So now, if someone comes in and take another book, and I have said in my report to the principal, I have sampled 4 books of this learners, I give the names, their work is done, so I fairly, in my opinion, say that everybody did their work. And now the principal comes and she takes someone else's book, work isn't done. She can't say, oh, but you didn't check. Because I was very sure to say, I checked 1, 2, and 3. I didn't check 7. You see? That's the same principle. So now, when they talk modified reports, you're never going to say, oh, this is a modified report. You're going to name them. Okay? And if you name them, a qualified report will also say, in our opinion, blah, 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 fairly present. And then what word am I looking for? Except. Except we couldn't find proof for this, and this. But everything else looks fine. It's just that little thing. It's like we went away this weekend, ne? And when we got into the house, everything looked fine, but when we wanted to switch on the plugs, it didn't work. You see? So everything in the house is fine. The bedding is fine. The water is hot. All the utensils is there, but the plugs don't, except for the plug in that room that doesn't work. You see? It's not that bad, but it's not perfect. If I look at the disclaimer, however, now what's the difference between a disclaimer and an adverse? A disclaimer you're still going to write. You're going to say, we do not express an opinion. Why would you say that? Because we couldn't find enough evidence. It's not just one thing I can't find evidence. There's a lot of things I can't find evidence, and I smell something rotting, but I cannot find evidence for it. So I suspect that there might be some things that's not according to the company law, it's not according to IFRS, but I can't find proof for it. So now what I say is, I cannot give an opinion, because I suspect something, but I can't find proof for it or against it. Okay, and then the shareholders can decide, are they going to bring in QQ? Because QQ is going to go into forensic auditing. You see? The last one is the worst one. Disclaimer suspects. Adverse knows. Adverse sees there's fundamental things wrong. They are supposed to pay VAT every second month, but he cannot find any proof of the VAT being paid. And then he just say, it does not fairly present. Can you see, this one is even worse than this one? Because if I don't express an opinion, it's just doubts. Maybe I can still be wrong. But adverse is definitely not wrong, because I've tested everything, and this book is not good. Now, what happened in this case study that they gave us? In this case study, they tell us what happened. This internal auditor, let's quickly go through it. What's an internal auditor? It's someone that works for the company. Are they biased? Definitely, because they are being paid by the company. Okay? Is their opinion objective? No, because they are working with these people, and they can get into trouble if things aren't going accordingly. Ne? So, but what is the job of an internal auditor? So if I look at the definition, basically, he needs to make sure that there's things in place that protect the company's assets. And what assets do we have? our cash, our money, our debtors, our stock, and fixed assets, and what else? Yeah, I think that's all. Okay, so they have to make sure that those procedures there is in place. So they have to see that bank recon is done often. If it's a big company, weekly, right? They have to check that debtors are paying on time. Are you phoning the debtor if they are 5 days late? Because that's the procedure. So he needs to check that it happens. Can you see that a company can have more than one internal auditor as well? Because you can have an internal auditor in charge of cash received, internal auditor in charge of cash paid out, internal auditor in charge of the people in charge of the debtors. There would be a whole section with just debtors. The stock is a totally different place that you can work. Can you see? You can really specialize. Okay. Now, who comes in? The external auditor. Remember, you can't say when we are working a company, how are we going to see that everything's above board? You can't say, oh, we'll bring in an external auditor. Because by law, a company has to bring in an external auditor at least once a year. So what you can say is you can say you want to bring in an external auditor more than once a year, right? To come and check. But external auditors are extremely expensive. It's a costly thing. So companies will first see how can they do it differently. No. Okay. So now what happened here? Now the first thing is they introduced to us new words that we didn't know. A gatekeeper or a watchdog. Now a watchdog or a gatekeeper is the internal auditor. Because what does a watchdog or a gatekeeper do? They are the barrier between the company and the external auditor, but also the things that can go wrong. He is supposed to be sure that we are transparent. He's supposed to be sure that our books are up to standard. Okay. So now look at what this gatekeeper does. This auditor was found guilty. In other words, now it's not just a suspicion of serious financial misconduct, including mismanagement of funds and the falsification of accounting records. Now, if you just read that 2 sentences, which audit report was this company supposed to get? If you were the external auditor and you found that the internal auditor falsified the accounting records, you have proof for it, which report would you give this company?
Adverse.
The last one, the adverse. The company is supposed to get the adverse, ne? Okay, now they say, this shocking revelation was highlighted, blah, blah, blah. Mr. Gel, who was supposed to be the watchdog, ne, turned out to be dishonest. So the internal auditor who was supposed to pick it up was the one who was. Do you agree with me, or is a watchdog something else according to business?
No, just trying to understand why did they split it?
Why?
Did they split it?
What did they split?
The funds split because they were saying the internal auditor at first.
Okay, and then they talk about Mr. Gel.
Yes, the watchdog.
So you can have internal auditors who are in charge of other internal auditors. Okay? Can you see here they don't say the internal auditor. They say one of them. Okay? So how a company would work is you would have the internal auditor here in charge of different internal auditors who's in charge of different departments. Does that make sense? So he was supposed to pick up that one of his internal auditors were not fine, because in the end, he's the one responsible. It's like, for instance, I'm the head of department for BCM. So I have to control business, economics, EMS, accounting. So I'm the watchdog. I need to make sure. So in other words, if somewhere they realize that one of the educators in our department doesn't really mark the work, they're going to go to that person, but they're also going to come to me because I was supposed to pick it up. And how will I pick it up? Because I need to check my teachers. So I think this guy was the head of the auditors. Okay. So now, they have been receiving unqualified reports. Can you immediately see here's a big problem? We're not supposed to get unqualified. We're supposed to get adverse. Can you see? Immediately, who do you suspect? The external auditor. Because who gives the reports? The external auditor. So this external, so either one of two things happened. Either the external auditor is in on it, or this falsification was done so well that he couldn't pick it up. It can go either way. The individual entrusted with ensuring financial integrity breached that trust by misappropriating funds for personal gain and tampering with accounting books to conceal their actions. This breach not only undermined the organization's financial stability, but eroded trust in its governance. So now the shareholders are questioning their corporate governance. Restoring confidence will require a concerted effort to whatever. This is what happened a few years back. I always forget the name of that company. It was an extremely big company that KPMG audited. And then it came out that the CEO was misappropriating funds. I'll get to the name now. I think that's why they put this in, because the auditors didn't pick it up. Okay, now, the shareholders will not be happy with the audit reports, which doesn't make sense because they should be happy with the unqualified audit report. Okay, but for the past 5 years, because for the past 5 years they got good reports. But was things good in the books? No. Okay? So after the recent findings, they like, but how didn't you pick this up? Explain what an unqualified audit report is and why the shareholders will not be happy. So unqualified audit report is if our books are in line with IFRS and company law. So an unqualified report is the best report you can get. It's the but now why would they be angry? Because they can't trust the report. The report wasn't true. That's why they're angry. Unqualified indicates that everything is free of significant errors. It's a fair representation. Okay? They have been misleading. They thought everything was above board, but it wasn't. Okay. An auditor serves as see there they tell you, an auditor serves as a watchdog regarding several important functions to ensure transparency, accountability, and compliance. Can you see those are corporate governance words? Explain 2 key functions of an auditor in the company, meaning an internal auditor. And what did we say? They have to make sure that there's procedures in place to protect the company's assets. So what did they say? They need to detect and prevent fraud. They need to verify that there's compliance. They need to recommend improvements of internal controls. They need to provide assurance to the public that everything's fine. They need to promote transparency. They need to identify potential weaknesses. That's your job as an internal auditor. Oh, we don't lock the gate for the cars. And What's going to happen if the security guard quickly goes to the bathroom because we only got one? So there's weaknesses. So let's fix the weaknesses. That's part of his job. Okay. As a shareholder, explain 2 effects that will be a concern based on the findings in this article. What's the first thing when the public image of a company is corrupted? People lose their trust. If people lose their trust, they take their money. People who want to invest don't invest. People who are invested are going to sell. What's going to happen if everybody wants to sell their prices? The market price will fall. So any of those things, if you wrote it, it's right. So the CFO, meaning the Chief Financial Officer, has emphasized that maintaining financial data integrity is crucial for the company to ensure accurate reporting and compliance with regulations. State 2 practices that can help to maintain the integrity of the accounting records. They're asking you internal control measures. When it comes down to it, he was supposed to also pick it up because he is there in charge of this guy. So he was also supposed to pick it up. But he listened to this guy's reports. He didn't go and do checks himself. So yes, in a way, the responsibility actually falls on you. Okay. Even though he got people in place to do it for him. So now, what did they say? You must have clear policies and procedures. If we have a packing house, when people come in, they're not allowed to take their bags in their lockers. They go through a scanner to see if they bring in weapons. They need to be searched to make sure that they didn't bring in other stuff. When they go out, they are searched again to make sure they're not taking out other stuff. Can you see that's procedures that needs to be in place? Monitoring and reviewing financial data regularly. Don't wait for the external auditor to come. Expect your internal auditor to also do a regular audit, as if he is an external auditor. Ne? So you don't have to pay him extra because it's part of his salary. Implement effective internal controls. What's a very popular internal control? Separation of duties, not rotation. Separation is you do your work, I check if it's done, and you will check if mine is done. Division of duties would be the guy doing the books is not the guy working with the cash itself. Rotation of duties is today you go to the bank, tomorrow you go to the bank. Okay. And that's it. And I hope